So my testimony is that I always knew I wanted to be a midwife ever since I was 9 years old. I actually still have a little cartoon of what I drew, and it was me being a midwife, even though I didn't know what that was really. I didn't know the name. It was me taking care of a pregnant woman. My mom still has that cartoon to this day. So it was just always inside of me. I know that a lot of people have probably 3, 4 professions before they find out what they're going to do, but it was just always there. And I do see it as very much a spiritual calling, especially more now than ever. We see all the things that are changing around the world right now. I think it's even more important to have someone who's going to give a safe passage to our babies.
That was a brief synopsis. How did you go to like college? Did you do it through a trade school?
Oh,
what did you have to do to become
certified?
certified?
Those were separate questions, but
Yeah.
you want me to answer that now?
Can you kind of walk us through that?
So I started out through a nursing degree. I think Sam was asking me which sort of pathway, because there are different ones. You can become a direct entry midwife, which means that you don't have to have any kind of a nursing background. And then you can become a licensed midwife from there on. There are a couple of good schools, probably the best in the country is in Seattle. Either way, you're seen as a licensed midwife when you pass the boards. I chose to do the more, what we consider traditional pathway in this country, and that was I went through nursing program, had a diploma school background, which was 3-year. They don't even have that anymore around. And then I went to my baccalaureate program, Nazareth College, and then worked 10 years. It was supposed to be a 5-year plan because, again, I always knew I wanted to be a midwife. I took a little bit longer to get there, and then I went to study Stony Brook, and that was 2.5 years of solid, amazing, intense learning.
Oh, fun.
But I didn't really start learning until I went into practice, and I think you'll hear anyone will say that once they graduate from whatever their field.
Now, a question on that. You said you had received a 3rd-year degree. My nutritionist, she's a registered nurse and a registered nutritionist. She is actually having to retake her degree now because she had a 3-year nursing degree. So she's getting her master's now because she won't be able to re-register unless she has it. Have you run into any problems like that, or
no? Maybe because I got the baccalaureate, I didn't even know that was happening. I'd be curious to know if they grandfathered in. I'm older than I look. I did all of that back in the early 80s, and so maybe there's some sort of grandfathering in that's happening.
She did her degrees in the late 70s, so.
Hadn't heard that,
No.
but
she never got her baccalaureate, so that might be why. That's just a
that
little
could
side
be.
comment, everyone.
That could be.
Okay, so Daniel and I have our wives have both given birth, and
I think she did. I got a kid.
We've both done the hospital bit, and I think both of us can say we're not too impressed with.
I've got a little story about that if you want me to share that.
Good.
Okay. Well, as you know, and our listeners know, Sam, Mandy, and my wife Elizabeth and I have chosen not to vaccinate our children.
Mm-hmm.
However, when we were in the hospital, Elizabeth was walking around the hallway. Heavy labor hadn't really started yet. So my brother-in-law, who was with us, said, "Okay, we're gonna go out to the car and get the stuff." So he and I went out. While we were out, her heavy labor started. She went into the room, and they came in and asked her to sign these forms so that she could do this. And in those forms was the consent for their first Hep shot, and they didn't tell her that. So they, as soon as Anna was out, and we cut the cord, they took her over, were cleaning her up. I couldn't even see. And then I saw a needle, and I went to go ask them what they were doing, and they had taken it out. The injection was done. They didn't tell her what was going on. So
horrible.
Definitely not impressed with the hospital route of things.
Well, sadly, that's a common story these days. And just recently had a client. Not all home birth plans end up having a home birth, and so there was a transfer and a very appropriate one. We weren't term gestation, so we had to go in. And sadly, she found out that she'd signed a bunch of consents that for circumcision that she didn't want on her son, and also for the hepatitis B vaccine. Now, there's an interesting background to hepatitis B, and I was there while it was happening. Back in the early 90s when this first got released, there were a lot of recalls. There was Endrix, which is from the Merck company, and then GlaxoSmithKline, was producing or actually the Hendrix is from GlaxoSmithKline. The Merck company was producing the Recombivax, and both of them were recalled because there were a lot of babies dying, and a lot of severe neurological problems resulted. So they pulled it off the market, both of them off the market for about 5 years. And then probably about 98 or so was when it came back into recirculation. And I don't know if they really made a lot of changes. I think that one thing that they did definitely change, as they did with all the vaccines, is they took the mercury out as the actual metal that causes.
Is that what they use it for?
They use it as an adjuvant, and any metal that the mercury was first used, and now that's only used in the flu vaccine and the swine flu and the regular flu vaccines. It's still in there, but now it's aluminum. Aluminum is the one that, as soon as it gets injected into your arm, that's what stimulates the inflammatory response in your body. It's for all of this antibody titer to happen, because they equate, if you have an antibody titer, then you're going to be protected from the disease, and it's much more involved than that. Your immune system's far more complex than that, but that's what we're told protects us against getting the disease. So that probably got back into recirculation. The hepatitis B vaccine did in 98, and you can really kind of map this, that gradually the first day of life in hospitals, the neonatal mortality rate went up, and now in this country and among all industrialized nations, we're number one. First day of life, neonatal deaths, and that's not just statistics that you're going to hear on your ABC, CBS News.
No,
that's not what they're going to want us to hear, but that is for real. I don't know where you rank throughout the entire world, but that's where we are with industrialized nations.
Wow.
And most of what you're talking about, hepatitis B, whereas it used to be sort of an option, you could wait 48 hours and maybe get it the day before the baby went home, but more often than not, parents would wait and have their first visit with a pediatrician and discuss it. Now it's given usually less than 12 hours, so I would say that that's a pretty strong correlation.
It was over.
Yeah.
First of all, why is my daughter going to have a sexually transmitted disease?
Yeah.
And first 8 years of her life is it good for, or something like that?
Yeah. We know that by the time the child reaches 12, that it's no longer going to be a titer. That's a given. Then they're looking at being offered boosters depending on their risk value. I think it's very concerning. We know the list of ingredients. You can look it up. CDC has it. But
only the active ingredients.
That's right. But very often there's other stuff in there that we don't know about, and that's the alarming thing. And with the hepatitis B, it comes in various. You don't even know which type. We call it hepatitis B, but as I said, there's the two main ones, and they often are combining them now with the Tdap. That's being offered in the pertussis, diphtheria, and so the whooping cough, the diphtheria, and the tetanus. The combination of those three, because we're very worried. I'm saying this very facetiously. We're very worried about whooping cough. It's epidemic proportions. That's what they're telling us, and in reality, it's not. And interestingly, that vaccine, the history with pertussis, when you look at who is getting the pertussis cases, it's the vaccinated population, and we know that the bacteria, the microbe, is actually altered. It's sort of game plan. It's an alternating microbe, and so it's no longer pertussis, it's parapertussis. So the actual vaccine that they're offering doesn't even cover or address the original microbe that it's supposed to. But they're having us give it anyways. I, as a professional, really protest, because we know that there's toxic substances in vaccines, and I'm being asked as a licensed person in this state, and all the professionals in my field in other states are being asked to encourage your wives to get these vaccines during their pregnancy, among the other things I told you about the flu vaccine, which is a combination, most typically the regular flu, which we know it doesn't work. Anybody who
the flu changes every year, doesn't it?
It changes, and even just within the year as it's coming across the continent. By the time they've made their best guess, but it is altered. It really can't cover. And also, like I said, they're combining it with the swine flu, which, as I already said, that whole combination has mercury in it. So you're getting, it's the buildup of the mercury year in and year out.
Does flu even have a season?
No.
Sorry,
no.
I had to ask the question.
No.
One thing that one of our guests, the first health episode we did with Lori, she told us that your immune system actually will attack heavy metals before anything else. Do you know anything about that?
Well, that's what I was mentioning, is that's why they put it in
antigen.
the substance. They're trying to get this inflammatory response, and meanwhile your body is responding. They're saying this
but
is
it's not
this is
doing
a harmful.
anything with the actual disease, right?
What is the metal is just to create this, like I said, this antibody response, and so this inflammatory response is what happens first, and so then the other stuff that they put in it, they, and in the case of the flu vaccine, they have injected whatever they think is going to be the viral strain into it could be into eggs, it could be into monkey in the lab. They use the green monkey. So we've got, in all of these vaccines, you've got either yeast or DNA of other organisms that they're using to basically be a mediator to get this initial response, and then they're coming up with this formulation, and that's what we're having injected into our bodies.
Beautiful.
Fantastic stuff.
So
there. I have one more question regarding
go for it.
the vaccines. My nutritionist, again, her husband is also a chiropractor, by the way. He's been my chiropractor for years. And in New York State, you are not allowed to attend a camp, like a Christian camp or a youth camp or a Boy Scouts camp, unless you are vaccinated. Or you have to be tested to prove that you're immune to the disease. Interestingly, by the time they got to their second child, they had stopped the vaccines half through. They had learned this as well. I remember he was still doing her schooling and getting into all this, so they stopped it. Well, when he wanted to go to a camp up in the Adirondacks, a Christian youth camp, he wasn't allowed to go because he didn't have the vaccination record, so we had to go get tested. Interestingly enough, they tested him for everything, even what he was vaccinated for. What he was vaccinated for, he was not immune to. But what he wasn't vaccinated for, he had all the antibodies already.
Because he must have had those diseases that,
right.
For example, was chickenpox.
Yeah.
And that is the only way to gain immunity. That's definitely the argument against believing in the vaccinology, I like to call it, because they use the word
theology of vaccination.
It is. They use the word immunization and vaccination interchangeably, and they're not the same thing. If you talk to an immunologist, do vaccines work on this level? They will tell you definitely across the board they do not. They're provoking an antibody response, but that's not the full picture. It's just what we've discussed. And so it is interesting because the term herd immunity, we've heard this a lot.
Okay.
That came into being way back when people used to have the measles and the mumps and chicken pox, and herd immunity was meaning most of the population had these diseases and they had true immunity. They've adopted that into the vaccinology to mean if you get injected, making us think that health comes out of a needle, right? That if you get injected, you're going to be immune to the disease, and that's now herd immunity. And so the people who have chosen not to, they're the ones that obviously get pressured. They're the ones that are made to feel you're going to get us sick. And of course we all laugh, right? Those of us who do not buy into that, because we say, well, if your vaccine works, then you shouldn't be worried, right?
Yeah.
You shouldn't be worried about those who choose not to.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So, just along that, we had spoken earlier about Murder by Injection by Eustace Moss, which you started reading. And I think within the first 20 or 30 pages, he's talked a little bit about the former holistic approach, where they would actually, instead of injecting you, they would expose you to a small amount of the actual live disease to let your body naturally do what the injection is supposed to be forcing you to do. So, any theories on why we don't do that? I mean, why are we shooting our bodies up with metals?
Well, there's no patent on it.
Well, shoot. We can't make money. We're concerned about people's health.
So